Welcome to Barca News. It is July 4th, 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, Barcelona have done some scouting changing or some structural changes to their scouting program. I'm going to tell you what they are, what these changes are. Also, Barcelona are currently tracking Pablo Torre. I'm going to tell you why. And finally, we know the truth now between the meeting that took place between Julian Alvarez and Diego El Cholo Simeone. And it's not what you think. We have a lot to discuss, so let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. My name is Boo, and happy 4th of July to all my fellow Americans here on the channel. Today is the 250th anniversary since the birth of this great nation. This is why I'm doing this video super duper uber boober late because, well, today I was celebrating. I went to some friend's house. We got to see an air show. There were what's called fighter jets flying over the Hudson. There was a big Navy flotilla where Navy ships from all over the world came and did kind of like I guess a procession. I don't know what do you call it, but all these ships from different parts of the world, Navy ships from different parts of the world were cruising on the Hudson. I got to see Spain's ship, so that's cool, right? Spain's playing on Monday, amongst many other nations. And then, of course, we got to watch the fireworks at night. I ate a lot. I drank a lot. Not alcohol, but like just liquids because it was really hot. And I had a good time. And I hope you had a good time as well, celebrating the 4th of July. And then, of course, I watched the World Cup matches, right? The round of 16 has officially began. Morocco has knocked out one of the host nations, Canada, 3-0. So Morocco are through to the quarterfinals. And, of course, France beating Paraguay 1-0 with a penalty kick. Who would have thought? I thought France was going to demolish Paraguay. Not at all. And that shows that, well, not as strong as a team might seem. Every team has a weakness. Every team can struggle. Every team can suffer. It doesn't matter who they are or what players they have. So we have our two first quarterfinalists, Morocco, and then we have France. And then, of course, tomorrow we got more matches. Very, very excited about that. But anyways, speaking of the World Cup, ladies and gentlemen, the Barcelona sporting director, Deco, has flown here to the U.S. And no, it's not so he can see the Statue of Liberty and the Golden Gate Bridge, but because he will be attending several World Cup matches. And if you wonder, Mo, why is Deco watching World Cup matches instead of working? Well, that's exactly what he's doing this for. He is doing it for work. So why is Deco here in the U.S. watching World Cup matches? Well, for starters, he's here to watch a Barcelona players. For example, we got Rafinha, who is who's still in the World Cup with Brazil. Deco will be watching him because, of course, Rafinha did get injured with Brazil. So Deco will be there to see how he's recovering, how he's training. And eventually, when he does play, it's expected that Rafinha could be playing at quarterfinals. If they qualify, then Deco could watch him play. There's also Jules Koundé, who's still with France. Also important to watch. Why? Because right now, Barcelona open to selling Koundé, not actively placing him on the market. But if a good offer arrives, Barcelona could consider it. So, of course, Deco there to see how Koundé does. And there's, of course, Anthony Gordon, who Barcelona signed right before the World Cup. He's still in the World Cup with England. In fact, they're going to be playing against Mexico tomorrow. So Deco will be watching that. So A, Deco will be there to watch Barcelona players. And B, Deco will also be there to watch and meet with the players and the agents of two Barcelona targets, which, of course, are Joao Cancelo, who Barcelona want to sign. But right now they're playing the long game because, well, Al Hilal insisting on those 15 million euros that Barcelona don't want to pay. And then, of course, there's Julian Alvarez, who's still in the World Cup with Argentina. And Deco is expected or could be meeting with Julian or his agent as well. And then the third reason why Deco is currently in the U.S., we said to watch Barca players, to watch Barca targets, but also to strengthen the relationship between Barcelona and other people in the world of football. And how is Deco going to do that? Well, he's going to be meeting with coaches, with agents, with representatives, with other sporting directors, with players. So he's going to be in the World Cup, meeting people, networking, right? That's very, very important in the professional world. And this, of course, is very good because, well, networking is everything in the professional world, whether it be football, your own career, or anywhere else. So Deco is currently in the US, not on vacation, but instead to work. And we'll see what comes out of this trip. Now, speaking of Deco, I do have some news because Barcelona are currently completely reshaping their scouting network with many structural changes. Now, what are these changes? Well, the changes are that Barcelona will be increasing its international scouting. Barcelona have always been known for recognizing talent within Catalonia for their academy. Of course, I'm not talking about the first team. First team, we've always had international signings. But as far as the academy itself, Barcelona have always, prided themselves and identifying young talent in Catalonia and recruiting them to their academy. Also talent within Spain. But now Barcelona will be increasing their effort to scouting young talent around the world, not just for the first team, but for the academy itself. Because, the next Lamine Yamal might not be in Spain, right? The next Lamine Yamal could be, I don't know, Nigeria or Mongolia or, I don't know, Trinidad and Tobago, right? So Barcelona will be increasing its international scouting, and they're doing this through several ways. Now, for starters, as we know, last year, Deco hired Joao Amaral as his right-hand man. Joao Amaral has really stepped up Barcelona's effort in scouting and recognizing young talents. Since Joao, for example, this past winter transfer market, we saw the arrival of Patricio Pacifico from Uruguay, Juvens Lee Onstein from the Netherlands, and then AJ Tavares from England, right? We've seen a lot more younger foreign talent join the academy. We also talked about a few days ago the hiring of Daniele Placido, right? The Italian who will be heading, who will lead the emerging talent department, right? That's going to be the department in charge of bringing emerging talent between the ages of 16 to 21. And there's more people that Barcelona have hired for their scouting department, including Roger Porta Capdevila. He brings experience in international scouting from his time at Real Betis, Getafe, and also South American football, right? Also, there's more hiring because Barcelona have also hired Jordi Biasson, who has joined the club, adding significant knowledge of Catalan football. So Barcelona, again, they're not stepping away from identifying young talent in Catalonia. They're strengthening that, but they're also expanding the reach around the globe. And then, of course, we have other people who are still at the club, including Bruno, who remains responsible for monitoring the Brazilian market. Also, there's Paulo Araujo. He joined under Paulo Araujo. Paulo Araujo left. That's why we brought Joao Amaral. Then there's Chechu Rojo, who will be overseeing talent in Spain's first and second division. So Barcelona will continue, of course, to identify and recruit talent in Catalonia and Spain, but now they will be increasing their focus on the international stage on the entire globe to recognize more young talent, bring to the academy, but also recognize young talent for the first team as well. And I know this might not sound exciting. People are like, oh, this is not a real signing. Someone said in the comment section. People forget Pedri, ladies and gentlemen, was not a first team signing. When Barcelona signed Pedri, they paid 5 million euros for him because he was this promising guy playing in second division at Las Palmas, right? I think he was like 18 years old or 17 years old. He was like young. He was not supposed to be a first team signing, right? Pedri was signed for Barça Athletic with the idea that he would go to Barça Athletic, train, get some experience, grow, develop, and maybe one day he was going to make the first team, right? And then, of course, Koeman saw him, shit his pants, and was like, all right, we need this guy on the first team. And voila, we have the best midfielder in the world on the first team. These things are important, ladies and gentlemen. Every single megastar at one point was just some young prospect, some young promising kid. Okay, nobody comes out of their mom's womb already a superstar. So you might not think this is exciting, but this is incredibly, incredibly important because it's not only important to have a strong team right now. We also got to think about the next 5 years, next 10, next 15, next 20. We can't just live in the present. We also have to think about the future. Anyways, let's move on to the next bit of news because one young talent that Barcelona had brought to the club from Racing de Santander was, of course, Pablo Torre, who at the time seemed one of the most promising young midfielders in Spain. Unfortunately, it did not work out too well for him at Barcelona, given how competitive it is Barcelona's midfield. You know, we have an incredibly stacked midfield. So Barcelona ended up transferring him to Mallorca for 5 million euros, and they still retained 50% of his rights because, of course, even though they did transfer him, Barcelona continue to believe in the potential that Pablo Torre has, and this is why they elected to keep 50% of his rights because they knew he needed to leave because he couldn't get a spot on the first team at Barca because it's so competitive, but at the same time, they still believe in his talent. Now, of course, Mallorca have been relegated to second division, so Barcelona are currently monitoring the situation of Pablo Torre to see what happens. Now, this doesn't mean that Barcelona are trying to bring Pablo Torre back to the club. Instead, they're trying to figure out what's going to happen with him because the coach of Mallorca, Luis Garcia, would like to keep him to help Mallorca get back into first division. But Pablo Torre does have a clause in his contract that allows him to go on loan without the permission of Mallorca, right? If another club comes and says, hey, I want to take this guy on loan, and Pablo says, okay, he could leave. Mallorca, there's nothing they could do because this clause kicks in if Mallorca gets relegated. So if a team comes and wants to take Pablo Torre on loan in first division and Pablo Torre is okay with that, he can leave Mallorca. There's nothing they could do with that. And that, of course, would be the ideal scenario for Barcelona. The ideal scenario would be for a first division team to take Pablo Torre on loan so he can continue playing first division football. And who knows, next summer, maybe that team ends up buying him or a different club sees Pablo Torre performing well with that team and decides to buy him. And then Barcelona can make 50% of that transfer fee. Now, on to that next bit of news because we have to, add to what we talked about yesterday, which is in regards to Julian Alvarez and Diego Simeone because El Cholo Simeone is currently in the U.S. He was in the VIP box yesterday watching Argentina versus Cape Verde. What an incredible match. And then, of course, the day prior to that, El Cholo Simeone, in an interview with ESPN, said that, he for the first time ever, he spoke about the whole situation with Julian Alvarez. Of course, we reviewed those statements in yesterday's videos, and he talked about how, Julian is top 5 in the world, and he really wants him to stay. And if he does stay, he's going to build a team around him, which, of course, was kind of weird because we've all heard those reports that the relationship between the two is actually broken, that Simeone doesn't want Julian there on the team since Julian has already said he wants to leave. So it's kind of strange to hear, all of a sudden Simeone talking about, how the relationship between the two of them is great and everything's great and they want him to stay and blah, blah, blah. And there was also these statements that Simeone said about Julian Alvarez. Says, well, I actually ran into him today on my way to visit Giuliano. Giuliano's his son, of course, for a bit, and we chatted a little. Mostly about how he's doing right now, how his ankle was holding up, and how important he is to that team. So Simeone not only glazing Julian, talking about how great he is, but also talking about how, they had a chat and they talked about the future and about his ankle, right? So El Cholo Simeone made it seem that, everything was fine. The relationship was great. They want to keep him. They want to build a team around him. And today, lo and behold, J. Jordi has revealed that was actually a lie. That El Cholo Simeone did, in fact, run into Julian while he was here in the U.S., but that meeting only lasted 10 seconds. It was real quick. They were walking and they got past each other. He's like, hey, what's up? What's up? Bye. Now, what did they actually speak about? They did not speak about the future of Julian. Only one thing was discussed, and it was discussed really quickly. Simeone asked Julian, how is your ankle? Julian said, it's good. And that was it. They didn't talk about the future. They didn't talk about the building a team around him. None of that. Simeone simply asked him, how's your ankle? Julian said, it's good, because as we know, Julian arrived at the World Cup with an ankle injury, which of course this does negate the whole facade that Simeone put up yesterday during the interview, saying that the relationship is all great and, they talked and everything's cool and blah, 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 blah. Now, this report has also been corroborated by a different reporter named Pedro Morata, which, of course, is even worse for the whole image that Simeone and Atletico Madrid are trying to put up, where it's like, oh, he's an incredibly important player for us. We're not going to sell him. We're going to build a team around him. The relationship is great between him and Simeone, blah, blah, blah. We all know none of that is true. Julian wants to leave. He wants to come to Barca. Simeone doesn't want him there because he made those comments. So, sorry, Atletico, but you're not going to be able to use Simeone's statements in the negotiations, because we now know that it's full of crap. Now, let's end today's short live or video by discussing Rafael Leao, because, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday I told you about how Barcelona had inquired about Rafael Leao. They called up AC Milan and said, hey, what's going on with this guy? AC Milan let Barca know that, the two of them have decided to part ways. AC Milan are okay with Rafael Leao leaving. In fact, they have already instructed him to look for a new club, and that they would be willing to accept 60 million euros for him, which is a huge, huge discount from the previous 150 million euros that AC Milan had quoted Barcelona back when Barcelona were in negotiations to sign Nico Williams. Now, I told you about how Barcelona, this was simply an inquiry. This was not Barcelona trying to negotiate or sending an offer or a pre-offer or anything like that. This was a simple inquiry. Hey, what's going on with this guy? Okay, thanks, bye. But we now know more about that inquiry, because I told you yesterday that Barcelona was maybe considering Rafael Leao as an option B in case Julian doesn't arrive, right? The number one option remains Julian Alvarez. If Julian doesn't work out, Barcelona have a series of option Bs that they could consider. One of them was Leao. Not the only one. One of many was Rafael Leao. Well, we now know more. We now know more, because Rafael Leao could be considered, not would be considered, could be considered if Julian doesn't come, and if AC Milan would be open to a loan, which they are. Now, of course, Barcelona would want just a simple loan, bring the player, test him out, see what happens, and then decide at the end of the season, as opposed to AC Milan, who are okay with a loan, but they would want an obligation to buy. So you take him on loan, and then next summer, you sign him on a permanent transfer. Now, again, this is one of the many option Bs that Barcelona could consider, not would, could, if Julian doesn't arrive. I want to make that very, very clear, because I thought I made that clear in yesterday's video, and then I saw comments, people like, oh, I can't believe Barca are considering now. I can't believe Barca are trying to bring... No, it's not what's happening. This is a simple inquiry, because Barcelona need to know what's out there in case the Julian signing falls apart. And if that happens, instead of them be like, oh, crap, Julian's not coming. All right, let's make calls. Hey, what's going on with this guy? Hey, what's going on? No. You do that work ahead of time. So when if the Julian thing falls apart, then you can be like, all right, I know what's out there. I know who's available. I know what the prices are. I know what the salary requirements of those players would be and the bonuses and everything. Why? Because I already did my homework. I already called around. I already met with agents. I already met with clubs. I know what's out there, and I know how much it would cost. So now all I have to do is just pick one, as opposed to start doing the work right then and there. So I hope that clarifies things. But if not, drop a question in the comment section, and I'll try to clarify it through there. Now, what do I think about this option? Honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me. A loan would make a lot more sense than a permanent transfer, of course. But even a loan, to me, doesn't make any sense. Why? For two reasons. First of all, we have Rafinha. We have Anthony Gordon. Why the hell would we need a third left winger? Yeah, sure, Anthony Gordon could play as a nine and Leao would be the other left wing. Sure, but that's not what we need. That's not what we want. We want an actual center forward that can play in a center forward position, not a third left winger as if we're Real Madrid who are just collecting left wingers, right? Second of all, Leao himself. I'm just not sold. I think Leao is an incredibly skilled player, very fast, explosive, can tear up defenses by himself. But my problem with Leao is that he's incredibly inconsistent, right? And as I've always said on the channel here, for me, for a player to be Barca level or any major club level, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, etc., they have to be consistent. They have to have, I don't know, be great at least 80% of the matches. Not 100%. That's impossible. These are human beings, not robots. Every great player has bad matches. Even Messi has had bad matches. But you want to have good matches 80% of the time, and maybe the other 20% you ghost or whatever. And Leao is not that, right? Leao is not that. And we need players who are consistent because that's what separates the top club players from the rest, right? Because at the end of the day, all these first division players, they're all very great. They're all skilled, right? They're all better than me and you. That's why they get paid to play football. We don't. They're much faster than us and more explosive than us, and they can kick better and pass better and control better, right? But what differentiates the players who end up playing for the top clubs versus the players who play in the mid-table or bottom of the table is their consistency, right? Top club players, they're good at least 80% of the time. Mid-table team players, maybe 50-50, right? Half of their matches are good, the other half they ghost. And then you have bottom of the table players. Well, they might have, 20, 30% of the matches good and the rest they ghost, right? So for someone to be Barca level or any major club level, they need to be consistent. And Leao is not. Sometimes he is prime Ronaldinho. He can take on 4 or 5 defenders and score a goal. And other times, he's prime Ferran, and that is a problem. But anyways, that is all. That is all. Let me know what you guys think in regards to the possibility of signing Leao. Again, this is a very remote possibility. A lot of things would have to happen. Julian would have to, boom, not a possibility. Barcelona could then go for other option Bs that are ahead of Leao, and none of them work out. And then Barcelona would consider Leao, and it would have to be a loan. So a lot of things would have to happen for this actually to go through. So it's a highly unlikely scenario for a signing. But nonetheless, let me know what you guys think about seeing Leao at Barca, and of course, everything else that we discussed. So don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, and as always, Visca Barça.